Welcome to The Road. This is a weekly podcast of All Saints Lutheran Church. I'm your host, John Pedersen, and I serve as pastor. Each week, we reflect on faith, life, and navigating the road ahead. The language of journey is common when we think about life. It has its joys and challenges along the way, and we all need a little encouragement and guidance at times to keep us going. There's a word in the Bible, asphalia, which means truth, but it's the same root word we use in English for asphalt, if you can believe that. It's a solid surface that makes travel easier and more assured. And so every week we're going to be exploring elements of faith and life that keep us on the road. Faith isn't about living a perfect life. It's about finding our way, getting through rough spots, but seeking out those great vistas too. You can find my weekly message here, but you'll also find special conversations with guests who have insights on things like wellness, parenting, and living with unique purpose. If you appreciate this podcast, remember to subscribe where possible and share it with a friend. Here's this week's message. Well, again, happy Reformation Sunday. Some of you will remember that some years ago, I took a group of youth from my church in suburban Milwaukee on a summer mission trip, and we went to the Black Hills in South Dakota. We spent time at a place called Atlantic Mountain Ranch. Some of you might even know that name. It was part of a week where we had a service project, and the youth got to pick what we would do. And they decided that we would help do trail work in Custer State Park. Our main project was creating a new stretch of trail about a quarter-mile long to work around a part of the trail that had become unsustainable. So we were cutting down trees and brush, removing stumps and rocks, and turning over soil where the path was supposed to go. It was pretty hard work, and especially for a group of youth and their adult leaders. There was a lot of excitement at the beginning. It's a beautiful place to begin with, and we had fun tools to play with. Everyone wanted one of the Pulaskis, which is a combination axe and hoe. The trail was picturesque, as you might guess, in Custer State Park with small bridges over streams, and it wound its way up a bluff to through a forest, and at the top of the trail was just this beautiful overlook of the Black Hills. The park ranger seemed harmless at first. He was young, in his 20s. He was easygoing in appearance, tireless in his work ethic, in better shape than us. And he pushed all of us to our limits. And as the day went on, the park ranger continued pushing us to finish our work, and the enthusiasm that they started with gave way to unkind comments about the park ranger. By the end of the first day, working at a higher altitude and challenged beyond what they expected, the youth were literally just strewn along the side of the path, laying down, trying to catch their breath. And on the way home in the vans, the youth talked about how much they disliked him. And yet, days later, in the van, heading back to Milwaukee, their perspective had already shifted. They were talking about how cool he was. They now found meaning in the challenge. Funny how that works, isn't it? Maybe if Jesus had come and done his ministry in the Black Hills, he would have talked about park rangers in his parables about the kingdom of God. Today is Reformation Sunday, which recalls the events of the Lutheran Reformation, but it's not on our calendar every year just to relive the past. It's there to remind us that we're always supposed to be reforming. Today is the final message in our series together, talking about building blocks for community, whatever the size. Christian faith offers many practices and perspectives needed to build and sustain life together. And Christian community itself has undergone a lot of changes over hundreds and now thousands of years, and we can learn something from that. The original Reformation certainly had its basis in the actions and teachings of Martin Luther and other reformers, but it also emerged out of changing times. There were things happening in the Roman Catholic Church in that era that provoked a response. At that time, the printing press had been invented and became a natural tool for spreading religious ideas outside of churches. People were wanting to read the Bible in their native languages rather than Latin. There were philosophical worldviews that were changing, particularly in the writings of Erasmus, that placed greater value on the individual and started to shift the world from the late medieval period into early modernism. Luther helped accelerate that. My point is that sometimes Reformation happens whether we're actively seeking it or not. The world starts changing around us and we get swept up in the river of history, and we have to make adjustments to continue on faithfully. So much has changed in the last couple of years and really beyond that, and it's not necessarily faithful to remain unchanged, to stay the same as much as we wish that might be possible at times. We look back at great periods of change like the Reformation and see it as positive and wonderful, but truly important moments like that often happen along with inevitable fears and uncertainty and, yes, pain, not just the positive things that we remember. If you read the original historical accounts of the Reformation, you very much see that. It's like cutting a new trail through a thick forest, wondering if you'll ever make it. A period of Reformation can leave us feeling tired and strewn out along the trail, trying to catch our breath, cursing the wind at times. It's sometimes only after the fact, looking back, that we see the Spirit working in, with, and under those events, bringing renewed life to us and to our faith. I like the image of trailblazing because somebody has to establish new roads and trails, whether it was the ancient Roman roads or the railroads or the Eisenhower highway system or those who have built trail systems through national parks. It's not easy work. Of course, you can choose to go anywhere. You can cut your own trails everywhere you go, but it gets tiring and you don't go very far. It's nice to choose an established path, too. Today's passage from John 8 is a classic one for this day, and it talks about freedom. It's always nice to come up with a short and sweet title for a message, and I thought about calling this simply Freedom, but all of us attach so many assumptions and experiences to that term that it can almost mean anything. Freedom from a faith perspective isn't quite the same as what we think of in terms of political freedom. Or even personal freedom. There's definitely overlap, but from a Christian perspective, freedom is given to us as a gift, and there's a spirit that accompanies it. Jesus says, "If you continue in my word, then you are truly my disciples, and then you will know the truth, and then the truth will make you free." If you continue. Do you hear the language of journey in that? The language of accompaniment and relationship. If you continue your journey in relationship with me, with my word, with my spirit, well, then of course, you're my disciples. That's a given. That's what a disciple looks like. A disciple is literally a student. A student keeps going to class, keeps reflecting on the lessons, keeps trying to apply what they've learned to new situations. And if you do that, then you will know the truth. That will just happen. If you're engaging in the material, if you're not sleeping through the lesson, if you're not just pretending to stay awake for the teacher, then you're going to start making connections. Even if it takes years or a lifetime, the lessons that maybe went over your head or you thought were unimportant earlier, you will start to see as wise as you go on. The guidelines, the insights, the key points, not all of them hit home right away, but in time, you will not just hear the truth, but you will come to know the truth. And then the truth will make you free. Sometimes you need to learn the truth deeply enough so that you can see how it applies in new situations that your teacher never experienced or had the chance to pass on to you. Sometimes if you understand those lessons well enough, you'll find that they actually have to apply in what seem maybe contradictory or opposite ways than they did in the past to remain true to the essence and the spirit. And so you find in the letters of Paul, for example, that when it comes to the freedom we find in faith, there's a difference between freedom as license versus freedom that flows from the Spirit. Freedom as license is, I can do whatever the heck I want. And in a sense, if pushed to the extreme, freedom is that. In fact, God's love and forgiveness is still real for us in those moments. But as Paul once put it to the church in Corinth, all things are lawful, but not all things are beneficial. All things are lawful, but not all things build up. Do not seek your own advantage, but that of the other. So freedom in God's Spirit isn't so much about pursuing whatever is good for me and whatever I want on a whim, but it's about pursuing what's good for the neighbor, what is ultimately the most loving thing to do. We can break old rules, but we do it when the Spirit guides us and when our purpose in doing so is for the good of others. And so Jesus healed on the Sabbath, and he worked and harvested grain with his disciples on the Sabbath, both of which went against religious rules and laws, but because it was for good. What is the most important commandment of all? Someone asked Jesus. Jesus boiled it all down to two, but really just one. Love God, love your neighbor. The common denominator, love. Of course, the trick is how you love everyone at the same time. How do you express that and put flesh on that? You find yourself making choices, and sometimes to show compassion and care for someone who really needs it or a group of people who really need it requires you to shift attention to them. And you find yourself on a new path. Sometimes it's brand new, one that you've had to create yourself, or sometimes there may be one already there that allows you to continue in the Spirit and go where you're feeling led. But freedom is no longer everywhere and anything, but it's a particular thing. A new path, a new direction, but an open one. The overgrowth crowding your way has been cleared, and it's possible to move forward now. That is what every thriving community needs, an open path, defined but freeing, a shared vision and set of priorities. This is what Reformation is like: hard work, increasing clarity over time, and finally an open path that leads to new life. That's what it was like 500 years ago. I think we're in that process again. As we seek to navigate the times we're in together, it's important to acknowledge that. People who study church history have been saying for decades that the church across the world is going through the biggest changes in its history, not since the Reformation, but since it became the favored religion of the Roman Empire in the 300s AD. I've spoken to some of those particulars before, but today isn't the day for a sidebar historical assessment reviewing 2,000 years of church history. But know that if you find yourself frustrated, afraid, uncertain, or even hopeful and excited about things that have changed, maybe we should spend less time fighting against the stream of history and more time looking ahead and to the present for where God is leading us in the midst of it all today. Even if you have to lie down along the path and catch your breath, look up from time to time and take in the surroundings. We're in the presence of the sacred. So much may be changing around us, but all we have to do is continue in the Word. Keep journeying on. Even if you feel tired today, if we continue in the Word, I think we'll find joy and gratitude and meaning on our journey home. Thanks be to God. Amen. That's this week's message. You don't have to navigate the road ahead alone. You can join with others at All Saints. Visit allsaintsmtka.org for more information. Have a great week.